Okay. All right, we are in business. Coach Julie here, kicking off our call for the week. Super excited. And I'll just let you go ahead, Julie, and I will give you the host. So that you
Yeah.
can add people as they join too.
Okay. Perfect. So topic for today is maybe not necessarily something a lot of people like associate with. Like, I think throughout the entire year, often people will have bouts of like low appetite, especially if they get like illness throughout the year or whatever. But it was interesting, and I thought like, oh, this could be like a really great topic for a newsletter, because within like 3 weeks span, I had like 4 different clients mention to me that like they were just struggling to eat at their maintenance because they were all at maintenance at that time. And I was explaining to them how common it is, especially when you are used to living in an environment where you have the 4 seasons. I think that when you live somewhere where it's like always hot, your body tends to adapt and you don't really notice these highs and lows as much as someone who like goes from the depths of winter to the heats of summertime. And especially at like these dog days of summer where it's kind of end of summertime, appetite can feel low. And their question was, well, how do I combat this? Do I just like undereat? Do I just do more intuitive eating? And honestly, it's more of you have to navigate your digestion a little bit more. So I'm going to share my screen so you guys can kind of see the different things that I'm going to go through here. Please hold while I select all of the things. Okay. So everyone good? Can see the screen? Okay. So first one is avoiding long periods of fasting. This is especially like relevant during the day. I think that a lot of times people think of fasting as like from dinner time to breakfast time. Yes, that is a fasting period. But I think that you'll notice these points of like nausea or low appetite, especially if you go long periods of time between daylight hours in the summer. And then I don't like, this kind of goes hand in hand, but especially with breakfast. So I talk about this a little bit. This kind of goes with that period of fasting. When you're breaking a fast, if you're feeling like, oh, my appetite is really low, I'm just not super hungry, starting off your day with some carbs is a good way to go because they are the easiest macronutrient to digest. Having just honestly, a little bit can go a long way. Something like 30 grams of carbs, something that's going to be easy to digest, and it's going to start our digestive system kind of moving. So it's going to help you kind of spike that hunger and the urge to eat a little bit more going into lunchtime.
Yeah, I was just going to interject. I think that makes a lot of sense, because if we want to do the opposite and be more satiated throughout the day, which is kind of something you'll implement right in a calorie deficit and a fat loss phase, the opposite is true, right? Having more of a higher fat, low carb breakfast, because if we're adding carbs in, and I was actually just listening to Huberman Lab episode with Dr. Gabriella Lyon, I think is her name, talking about just kind of this topic where eating carbs in the morning really stimulates hunger throughout the day. And they were going into the reasons behind that as to why, but that's like really in line with what you're talking about. And hearing you say that, I'm like, oh yeah, I was just listening to that this morning. And for me, when I'm just starting a fat loss phase right now, so I'm implementing a calorie deficit, I am like pretty keen on having a very low carb breakfast with high fat, because that satisfies me a lot longer throughout the day. Where if I start my day with maybe my protein muffin, I notice hunger is way more elevated throughout the day. So I think, yeah, so I think if hunger is low, having carbs in the morning is going to benefit you for increasing appetite throughout the day. And I think the reasons you said so, but maybe there's more to it even than that.
Absolutely.
That we fully understand.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
For sure. And understanding too, like what your body needs and like what you want to have at a point like this where appetite is really low, you could probably have a fairly like caloric dense carb that isn't very high volume, right? Something like a muffin that's really dense, or something like a bagel. Yeah, it's like dense and it's going to give you a big hit of carbs compared to, like, honestly, even something like rice. I feel like for the same amount of carbs that you could get from like a bagel, rice is going to be a lot more volume, especially if you're pairing that with some protein and stuff. So you have to consider all of those things when you're trying to make a decision on like how to approach it. And it's not one size fits all by any means. One person that's like, yeah, I start off my day and I have like 20 grams of carbs from oatmeal. Another person is like, oh, oatmeal just does not sound good in the morning and I don't want the heat from it and whatever. So take with it what you need, and play around with it. It doesn't mean if you try something and it doesn't work for you that the problem is the carbs or the problem is eating breakfast. Like, try something different and take a different path. And then the second one was, or kind of the third one now, seasonal fruits and veggies. And this was a big one that I push. Thank you, David, for another just knowledge bomb that he likes to give. But implementing fruits and vegetables that are within season where you live or whatever season you are in. In the Midwest, we typically have no need for like tropical fruits other than the summertime. We are going to digest fruits and vegetables better when the exposure to sunlight is similar to what our exposure is. So during the daylight, or during the summertime, when we're getting much more daylight hours, much more sun on our skin, our vitamin D levels and absorption and everything is nice and high, our digestion of fruits and vegetables that also get lots of light exposure are also going to be better. So things like tomatoes and bell peppers, cucumbers, think about like what's in season right now, compared to potatoes, white potatoes, sweet potatoes, carrots, things that grow underground and they don't get a lot of daylight exposure on the meat of the fruit and the vegetable. So this is kind of a combination of things. You have a few different benefits going on here, but one big one is going to be that digestion. Because if you're eating a lot of tubers during the summer months, digestion of that is going to be a little bit different and it might be slowed. So you might have some slowed motility there. And that could be the reason that you're feeling a little bit of low appetite, because digestion is slower. And then the next one is easier to digest proteins. This is another one that kind of goes hand in hand with the digestive tract and how some things are heavier and some things are easier on the digestive tract. So protein is protein, right? We know this, that no matter what source we use for protein, we're going to digest it in a very similar fashion. But what form that protein comes in can absolutely impact your feeling of satiation versus not feeling very satisfied. So think of it from a liquid to a solid standpoint. So Greek yogurt is going to be a little easier on the stomach and easier to digest as long as you're good with dairy, compared to something like a full chicken breast or a steak. And here I use the example. So you've got Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, ground meats. So even a meat that, like, let's just say chicken, you have a chicken breast, you could have diced chicken, you could have shredded chicken. I'm going from like a hardest to digest. We're having to do a lot of work in our mouths and with our teeth through mastication in order to swallow it and utilize it. Every time I'm like kind of going down where like, okay, you have shredded chicken now and it's really rough and torn apart. That's going to actually still be easier to digest because we're going to still chew it a little bit, obviously. But once it gets into our stomach, we're kind of breaking down those barriers that makes our stomach work so hard to create all these enzymes to digest that. And that can kind of go all the way to ground meat. So if you had a ground meat, even cooked in like a more solid form, as long as it's not like super dry, that is going to be easier to digest than a solid form of that same meat, like chicken. So yeah, and on the flip side, I know we talk about this a lot. If you're having lots of protein shakes and Greek yogurt and cottage cheese, like it's satiating you, but there are other ways that you can satiate yourself more. through more solid forms of food, and more fibrous foods as well on top of that. So, yeah. And then the last one is staying hydrated. So dehydration can also play just like a really big role in appetite. Our brain and how it signals, even hunger, our brain will tell us that we're hungry before it will tell us that we're thirsty. So if you get to the point where you're thirsty, you're probably already slightly dehydrated, because our bodies are just built to like try to avoid that at all costs. And we utilize the food that we eat, the water from that food that we eat, very well to hydrate our bodies. When we do have dehydration, it can kind of create a bit of imbalance, especially within our electrolytes, and cause us to feel kind of lethargic, which I think that kind of goes hand in hand with just like, I just am not really feeling like eating. Like I could just go take a nap. And when really you just need that food, fuel yourself, and probably don't need to take a nap at that moment. So, yeah, there's always good reasons to stay hydrated.
I was gonna say that's a really good indication. Like, in a calorie deficit, I either feel very hungry or I feel very tired and sluggish. I mean, the deeper you get into that, right? So paying attention to what that is, if it's hunger, and this is opposite, like this is for if you're, I'm just talking in general, opposite end of the spectrum, if you are noticing those things, if you're noticing hunger keeps coming up and you're drinking plenty of water, then playing around with your food volume and food selections can be really helpful to get more fiber, get more protein. Those things are going to help satiate you more. Where if you're feeling really sluggish and tired and you know you're in a deficit, then really doing what you can to get more hydrated, because that's likely what you need. And you're going to notice that a lot more if you're also under eating. So
yeah,
attention to that. On
which I think that
yeah,
people kind of misunderstand. Well, I don't know if I would say it like that, but I think there was a big push for like drink water to avoid eating, like drink a glass of water before your dinner meal, you know. And I think that that does help with hydration, and it is going to fill up your belly, but it also is going to be creating like not a super great environment for digestion, because it's going to probably bring down, right, or up the pH of your stomach when your body is trying to produce biles and salts and all these enzymes to digest food. So yeah, getting hydrated and drinking throughout the day is going to be super important.
Not just chugging a bunch of water before a meal. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you can kind of see just with the suggestions that I have, my suggestion for low appetite is not just to like avoid it, eat intuitively, or undereat. It's to try to create a better system to help navigate what you're feeling. It's not always a yes and no. And obviously every single person is going to be different. But I think that, you know, when we are feeling those things, sometimes we have to think about like, okay, well, what's best for our bodies? Like, you know, that's where just being intuitive, if you're like, oh, I'm just not feeling hungry, and you have like a piece of toast the first 11 hours of your day, who are you helping there? Because you're definitely going to need more than that in order to sustain your activity, because chances are your activity has probably bumped up. And you're probably doing way more than you do during the winter months. So, you know, I'm not saying to like force feed yourself, but I think that's why some of these tactics help to like spike hunger and improve appetite, and not just like force feed yourself your normal macros at breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah. I think too, having, I don't know if you mentioned this and I just missed it, but usually for most people, drinking the bulk of your calories is not a good idea. But in this case, that can be a great tool. Having a protein shake, you can pack 500 calories into a protein shake and drink that down just as quickly as a protein shake that's 200 calories, and you really like don't notice a big difference. So doing what you can to add calories through, you know, those lower volume options like liquid calories can be really helpful. And it's also refreshing too in the summer when you're like, I want something cold, then you could blend up a smoothie, and that's a great way to Yeah, add in some nutrients and protein and calories,
Right.
and not have to be like sitting down and eating another meal when you aren't hungry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That kind of, so I mentioned like the easy to digest proteins, and that would kind of go back to that. The only thing I would say to be wary of with that is volume. Because when you do like a super packed smoothie, for example,
Mhm.
it can be a lot of volume. So, starting with something like a protein shake that's only like 12 ounces of liquid is a
Yeah.
really good idea.
Yeah. And then thinking when you're adding to that shake, right? Where you're saying volume, like a lot of berries isn't going to give you, that's going to be a lot of volume for low calorie. Or if you add
Right.
banana, maybe some avocado, some nut
Yeah.
butter, now you're able to add a lot of calories without a ton of volume. So thinking of those
Mm-hmm.
more caloric food options that are going to blend up really easily and not add a ton of volume to your shake too.
Yeah,
Going
for
for
sure.
even like a whole milk added to that versus like a non-fat or an almond milk,
Mm-hmm.
can really help. Yeah, with
Yeah,
intake too.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, but that was that. I think that everyone's kind of getting to the end of that season, but I just really noticed a big trend with that from my clients. So I thought this would be a great topic for everyone to just kind of dive in on a little bit. See how everyone else is feeling at the end of the summertime.
Yeah, and I think when it gets really hot, I don't know, I have noticed that myself too, and I think it's a combination of it being very hot outside and then being a mom, no structure to the day, like it's just very chaotic
Mm-hmm.
running from one thing to the next to the next, and so I think it's easy to just drink a coffee or have some water and like not notice that hunger coming up or even just that you're feeling tired until it's too late. And a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
what will happen is people will not be hungry through the day and then they'll finally get home and be able to relax for a second and then food is abundant and they
Mm-hmm.
overeat. So even though they feel like they're not eating and they're actually overdoing it on calories and that can impact weight loss goals or even just body composition goals because that's not going to set you up well for improving your body composition from like a muscle protein synthesis standpoint, because you're going to want to eat that protein throughout the day, not just at the end of the day
Mm-hmm.
paired with high fat, high carb, more satiating foods because you've underfed yourself all day leading up to that. So
You're right.
pre-logging your food can be really helpful. I think in that case, and just like, the evening before looking at your MyFitnessPal and logging what you think you will eat the next day. And that gives you at least a plan so that if the day is chaotic, you're in your car a lot, you know kind of what you should prep and pack and take with you, so that you don't get behind on energy or hunger and feel the effects of that later in the evenings.
Yeah, you're right too. I think that, with the summer, it's like it's hot outside. I'm in and out of my car, and it's, like a hot box when you get in there, it's sitting in a parking lot or something like that. You go into places and it's chilly and you're sweaty, and then you've got like sweaty clothes on. And by the time you get home in the evening and you change into some comfortable clothes and the air
Like
conditioning is
veg
blasting, you're
out.
just like ready, yeah, to veg out. And like you said, that can absolutely throw things off. And it's not providing you what you need when you need it,
Yeah.
especially from a carbohydrate perspective. Like if you're not eating anything all day and then in the evening you're eating all these carbs, they're not there when you need them to be there six
No.
hours before.
Right. Yeah. So I think pre-logging can make a big difference. Having easy foods to eat on the go that sound good. I love to have like beef chunks in my car. Even just throwing some veggies or crackers or whatever it is that I need to take with me on the go that's gonna sound good and be easy to eat, maybe to and from places if need be. And then just remembering that our bodies are smart, so they are going to make up for that at some point. I think a lot of times women will think, oh, I'm not hungry, so I'm gonna just ride that out. Maybe that'll put
Mhm.
me in a calorie deficit, and like that feels really good to just kind of capitalize on this lack of hunger. But if you're not planning and you're not getting what you need throughout the day, then your body's going to make up for that, whether it's in the evenings or it's on the weekends. And then you get into that kind of poor cycle of restrict binge that we don't want to be in, as well as that just impacting how you feel. Like you feel sluggish, you wake up feeling kind of gross from overeating in the evenings or overeating on the weekends. You don't have steady energy throughout the day because you're not fueling yourself. Workouts are impacted. And so you end up like thinking you'll use it to get ahead when really it kind of sets you back. So keeping that in mind too, and knowing sometimes, I mean, quite often actually in our modern world, intuitive eating is just really not going to serve you well because we don't live with gardens and, you know, quality food only being the only thing that we eat. So we have a lot of options. And so if we just go off of our, like what's intuitive, then we're usually going to be negatively impacted, I think, in regards to energy and body composition and just overall health. So sometimes it's eating when you're not hungry so that later you feel more satisfied and satiated and can move towards where, you know, optimal health and wellness. So
yeah, I think you can be intuitive, but still like prioritize your health and your goals, whether it be composition goals or health goals. And that's why I always call them values. I think that like looking at your food values is important, you know, and not just like what's important to you, but like what do you really truly like to have and how can you make that work?
For sure.
You know?
Yeah, because you can be intuitive in the sense that like, oh, I'm craving something savory or sweet. You can still make that a high protein, high fiber, well, like rounded, nutrient dense meal, but you can, you know, decide like, do I want Mexican seasonings or do I want Thai or Indian seasonings or do I want just like more of a sweet flavor? You can create a lot of things and go off of your senses and desires in that way, but using the knowledge that you have to also benefit you from a health standpoint, I think is a blessing we have with the education and tools we have nowadays to kind of offset the lack of quality we have in a lot of our foods.
Yep. Love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions? I think we just have, one, Mandy, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them.
Chime in.
And then also, in the groups, I think we're coming into fall too. And so for me, appetite picks up, but mostly desire to cook picks up in the fall for me. Like the cooler temperatures make me excited to cook again. Fall's my favorite season to cook. Where winter, it just sounds hard to go out in the cold and dark and get food and prep food and all of that. I think fall, the days are still kind of long, but it's not so hot that we do have just more appetite. So it's a fun time to get creative and think about what's in season right now, like coming into fall, and center your meals around that. And then you're going to have the best tasting foods as well as like best nutrients too.
Yeah.
They're in season.
Squash season.
Yes. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining. And thank you, Julie, for talking through this. And if anyone has any questions, just tag us on the groups and we'll be happy to answer them there. And I hope you all have a great mid-August. Great week. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one. Talk soon.
Bye.